Welcome to the 7 o'clock evening news. I'm John Shelton. We begin with the main headlines. Libya's largest oil port ablaze after rebels launch rocket strikes amid warnings the country could descend into chaos. Sudan's government is stepping up pressure on the UN as Secretary General prepares recommendations on the future of the UN African Union peacekeeping in Darfur region. Pro-Russian rebels in eastern Ukraine free 4 Ukrainian prisoners in a day after the two sides exchange hundreds of captives. And severe flooding in Malaysia, battling some of the worst floods in decades, with more than 100,000 people forced to leave their homes. US Central Command said fighter jets, bombers and drones carried out more than 30 airstrikes against the so-called IS group in Syria and in Iraq, destroying vehicles, groups of fighters and rocket and mortar systems. Today, US Central Command announced fresh airstrikes on buildings being used by the so-called IS group near Aleppo in Syria. The strikes are part of an effort to weaken the extremist militant group that have seized control of parts of both countries. Earlier, Iraq and Turkey discussed cooperation in countering IS threat, including an Iraqi request for intelligence sharing and the possible delivery of Turkish arms to Iraqi forces. Iraq's Prime Minister said during his visit to the neighbouring country. The head of the Syrian opposition met with Egyptian and Arab League officials in Cairo today. Hadi al-Bahra, president of the National Coalition of the Syrian Revolution, and opposition forces met with Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry and Secretary General of the Arab League Nabil El-Arabi in separate meetings in the Egyptian capital. The officials discussed the latest developments in the Syrian crisis along with possible political solutions. Syrian opposition maintains that any negotiated settlement must be based on the Geneva Communication Platform, which states that there should be a political transition in Syria toward democracy by the formation of a transitional governing body with full executive powers. Israeli gunboats have opened fire on Palestinian fishing boats off the northern coast of the Gaza Strip as the Tel Aviv regime's fight against Palestinians in the besieged Silva continues unabated. More with Majd al-Wahidi from Gaza.
Another hard day for fishermen. Witnesses said that Israeli naval forces opened fire at fishermen off the coast of northern Gaza. Boats were forced to turn back. No injuries or damages were reported. But for people here, working under fire is a great violation to their simple human rights.
Every day, they fire at our boats. In the media, they say we have a limit of 6 miles. But on the ground, the fishing zone is only 3 or 4 miles. They used to shoot randomly. Now, they target us with gun boots. When will we have our human rights? Since the ceasefire agreement, 30 fishermen were detained by Israel. They shoot at them in a day basis. Even before 5 minutes, there was heavy fire in the sea. What fishermen ask for is simple. They want their freedom, sailing with no obstacle or fear of loss and death.
Under the ceasefire agreement, Israel said it would immediately expand the fishing zone of Gaza's coast and allow fishermen to sail as far as 6 nautical miles from shore. But since then, there have been widespread reports that Israeli forces have at times opened fire at fishermen and detained them within those new limits, and the zone has not been expanded. Israel also targets agricultural lands and farmers near the border.
This violation reflects that the Israelis don't want to have any commitment regarding the ceasefire, and they preparing something dangerous against Palestinians if there is no serious movement from the international community to stop the Israeli aggression.
With the fragile ceasefire and Israel's land, air and sea blockade, Gazans continue to suffer with no clear end in sight. When Israel shoots at Palestinian fishermen and farmers, it doesn't only break the ceasefire agreement, but it also destroys the Palestinian economy and leaves economic depression and poverty in a constant rise. Majlou Haidi, Kuwait TV, Gaza.
One of Libya's biggest oil facilities was hit by a Grad rocket, setting an oil storage tank on fire. The facility was not operational at the time, having been shut down weeks ago due to ongoing clashes in the area between armed factions allied to competing governments fighting for control of the country's biggest export terminal. More details in the following report by Heba Abdul Rahman.
Officials said that a rocket set a storage tank at the eastern Libyan oil port of Sidr on fire as armed factions allied to competing governments fought for control of the country's biggest export terminal. Clashes were also reported from Sirte, a city west of Sidr, killing up to 19, among them 14 guards at a power plant, but no more details were available. Sidr and its adjacent Ras Lanouf terminal have been closed since a force allied to rival government in Tripoli moved east, trying to take them, part of a struggle between former rebels who helped topple Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, but now fight for power and a share of oil reserves. Libya has had two governments and parliaments since a group called Libya Dawn seized the capital in August by expelling a rival faction, installing its own prime minister and forcing the recognized premier Abdallah Thani to operate out of the east with the elected House of Representatives. The Tripoli-based government says that Al-Thani's forces have allied themselves with former Gaddafi officers such as ex-general Khalifa Haftar. The spokesman for a security service allied to Thani's internationally recognized government said that the rival force tried taking the Sidr with speedboats, opening fire on an oil tank. While the spokesman for the rival force said that it had launched a new push to take the ports, but denied it had sent boats or shot any at storage tanks. He blamed the other side, saying that aircraft had attacked the tank. This comes as clashes were also reported in Bin Jawad, west of Sidr. A spokesman for State National Oil Corp said that the fighting has reduced Libya's crude output to 352,000 barrels per day. He added that only the Brega, Sarir, Misla and offshore operations were still producing. Sidr and Ras Lanouf ports had been processing an estimated 300,000 barrels per day.
Sudan's government is stepping up pressure on the United Nations as Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon prepares recommendations on the future of a joint UN-African Union peacekeeping force in the country's violence-wrecked Darfur region. In the government's latest move, President Omar al-Bashir ordered the expulsion of two top UN officials, a decision condemned by the Secretary-General as unacceptable, and the UN chief called on Sudan's government to reverse its decision immediately. Joint peacekeeping mission with nearly 16,000 military, over 3,000 police and more than 4,000 civilian staff has the second highest budget of all UN peacekeeping forces. In Pakistan, airstrikes and ground forces killed 39 militants as part of an ongoing operation in a volatile tribal region near the Afghan border. The airstrikes were carried out last night north Waziristan tribal region, adding that an underground tunnel system and a large underground cache of weapons and ammunition were also destroyed. The military claimed several important militant commanders were among the dead, but didn't provide further details on the identities of the slain militants. In other developments, security forces have killed the alleged planner of the recent school attack in the city of Peshawar. More prisoner exchanges are expected between Ukraine and pro-Russian rebels in the east, a day after the two sides swapped hundreds of captives. Ukrainian officials say they are hoping that 4 soldiers will be freed. The number of militants due to be released has not been confirmed. Yesterday, Ukraine said 146 of its soldiers had been freed for 222 rebels. In another development, Russia has agreed on a new deal to supply coal and electricity to Ukraine, which is struggling with a lack of raw fuel for power plants due to a separatist conflict in the industrial east. Russian officials said today the move comes a day after Kiev said it would suspend train and bus services to Crimea, effectively creating a transportation blockade to and from the region, annexed by Moscow in March this year. Kiev has briefly cut off electricity to Crimea before. Afghanistan's NATO-led foreign force mistakenly killed 3 civilians in an airstrike less than a week before most foreign troops are due to pull out at the end of a 13-year mission. The mistaken killing of civilians in airstrikes has been a source of anger throughout the force's mission, frequently straining ties between the NATO force and the government. The latest incident took place in Logar province, just south of the capital, Kabul. At least 7 people have been killed and over 132,000 fled their homes in one of the worst floods in Malaysia's history as authorities struggled in their rescue efforts amid power outages and destruction of roads. Prime Minister Najib Razak today announced additional funds to help flood victims nationwide after landslides, roadblocks and swirling waters enveloped the country's 8 states. Razak reached Kelantan City to assess flood emergency operations today after cutting short his holiday in the US. Another official admitted rescuers were facing challenges with power outages and roads being washed away by the floods. The Kuwait's UNDP Junior Professional Officer Programme for the year 2014 was officially launched at an event held at the United Nations House in Mishrif area. In 2012, Kuwait signed a memorandum of agreement with UNDP to provide 10 Kuwaiti junior professional officers per year to serve in various entities of the United Nations. Heber Abdul Rahman has more details in the following report.
Under the patronage and with the attendance of Minister of Social Affairs and Labour and Minister of State for Planning and Development Hind Subeh, the Junior Professional Officer Programme 2014, or GPOP, was officially launched with the announcing of the names of the 10 Kuwaiti GPOs who will shortly be deployed to begin work for the UNDP.
This program started in 2012. It is the first collaboration between the Kuwait government and the United Nations Women Program to bring the young talent from Kuwait and to send them to different parts of the world working for United Nations. And this the Junior Professional Program is a program that has been almost reached 50 years of age. The program has always been funded by different donors. The goal is to select the best talents from different donors and send them to different parts of the world, focusing on poverty reduction, focus on democratic governance, and even some different areas such as environment and so on. So that program has been going on for 50 years, and the goal of the program is twofold. First, to train these young talents to give them the hands-on experience in development work.
I'm very excited about that, and I'm actually very happy that it's going to start the second batch. Myself and my colleagues, we are from the first batch, and we're looking forward to more batches to come on board because of the experience they're going to gain and the whole challenges of being a JPO. My experience, I mean, words could not describe this experience. It's a really an addition to our expertise and our career. And being in such a position where you don't really think of yourself only, you think of the country you're representing. This is, I think it's a very noble feeling because on every step that you take, you basically think of back home, how can I implement this? How can I do it differently back home?
These are the second group of GPOs to be recruited under the program, with the first group of 10 beginning their assignments in 2012. The 10 GPOs recruited this year will serve for 2 years in a range of professional specializations, including environment and energy, communications, business management, and human resources, and will be posted to duty stations across the world. The first batch of 10 Kuwaiti GPOs stationed in New York, Copenhagen, Vienna, Barbados, and Istanbul. The second batch of the GPOs will deploy December 2014 to January 2015 to New York, Copenhagen, Vienna, Bonn, Brussels, Singapore, and Bangkok. The official launch of the Kuwait Junior Professional Officer for the program 2014 came in line with the state's policy that was adopted recently to encourage the Kuwaiti youth to indulge in the practical life. From UN House in Mishrif area, I am Hab Abdurrahman reporting for English News.
North Korea has condemned US President Barack Obama over the release of the film The Interview about a fictional plot to kill its leader, Kim Jong-un. The country's National Defense Commission, NDC, also accused the US of shutting down the country's internet. Sony Pictures had originally pulled the title after a cyber attack and threats. The company later reconsidered releasing the comedy on Christmas Day. A number of critics, including the US President, had warned that freedom of expression was under threat if the movie was shelved. The controversial film was shown in some US cinemas and is available online, with several hundred independent theatres coming forward and offering to screen it. However, larger cinemas decided not to show the film. Thousands of travellers had their journeys severely disrupted as heavy snow and winter storms swept the UK, closing roads and airports and bringing chaos to large parts of the country. Sleet and snow hit the north of England, the Midlands and Scotland, with the Met Office warning today that nearly all of Britain had been gripped by ice. Airports closed while their runways were cleared of snow as a band of wet weather crossed the country from Merseyside and North Wales through the Midlands and Yorkshire. To compound the problems, thousands of rail passengers trying to return home after the Christmas break. For a chance to see our reports again, please visit our YouTube channel at MOI Kuwait News. That's all the news for now, but you can join us again for the news brief at 11 p.m. Before we end, here is a quick reminder of today's headlines. Libya's largest oil port ablaze after rebels launch rocket strikes amid warnings the country could descend into chaos. Sudan's government is stepping up pressure on the UN as Secretary General prepares recommendations on the future of the UN African Union peacekeeping in Darfur. Pro-Russian rebels in eastern Ukraine free 4 Ukrainian prisoners in a day after the two sides exchanged hundreds of captives. And in Malaysia, battling some of the worst floods in decades, with more than 100,000 people forced to leave their homes.